welcome to another episode of Not Too Deep. I'm your host, Grace Helbig. A very exciting episode is in store for all of you. Buckle up. Jasmine MANS is here. She's an incredible artist, poet, and weed cannabis industry contributor. You'll find out exactly how. We talk about her brand new book, Black Girl Call Home, a collection of poetry available at your Target. Go get it. We also talk through her genius, simple but genius idea to get over writer's block, which she is calling the kitchen theory. And we talk about Buy Weed from Women, her cannabis merch company that she started, smoking weed in her own home, writing beautiful poetry. Hear how all of that blossomed. And just get into the beautiful vibes that I think this episode has. And I mean that authentically. I'm still reeling from how wonderful it was to talk to her. And I hope that you enjoy it as much as I do. Enjoy this episode of Not Too Deep with Jasmine MANS. Jasmine, I'm so excited that you're here. You are a poet, an artist. You have one of the most soothing voices that I have ever heard, and I cannot wait to listen to it for the next 45 minutes. I'm curious how you describe yourself to someone that might not know you.
I guess a Black girl who's still trying to figure her stuff out. I don't know. That's a really hard question to ask. It's a humbling question to ask. I think just finding my way, you know?
Yeah. You've found ways, I feel like. I mean, you had your follow-up poetry collection book come out a couple of weeks ago or a month or so ago called Black Girl Call Home. Yeah. And I have to know, how did this happen? How long has it taken? And how has it been now that it's out and in people's hands and ears and brains?
Yeah, well, how it happened was I got the beautiful opportunity to write a book, to build a book package. I got great agents, and they were just like, bring us back what represents you and your art and your career and you as a literary writer. And I went home and I sat with so many different concepts and ideas and writing that I already created. And I was just like, well, what do I have here? And I noticed that there were a lot of patterns that I already had in my work in regards to being a Black girl, my body, love, falling in love, my city. And then there were things that I wanted to discover while going on my journey and writing this book. And so I let research lead me, and then breadcrumbs lead me. And then before I knew it, I had this finished manuscript of what meant something to me and what I hope would mean something to women and most importantly, Black girls.
It's what a interesting and beautiful way to kind of construct this artistic journey for you, that you looked at everything you already had and thought, what's here and where does this take me, rather than I'm starting from blank and need to come up with something out of nothing.
Yeah, because we have so many patterns, and people say often that all artists have an obsession. And so you essentially start with your obsession of I write about this a lot, or I do this a lot. And what you do the most tells you where your head is and where your heart is. And so I definitely looked at what I did the most and who I was the most of. And then a part of the journey is being proud of that. This is where my work is, and I'm proud of that.
Wow. Because I think a lot of people would think, this is what I've done, so I have to do something new, rather than being proud of, the patterns and the kind of consistency or the focus that they've had previously on things. I feel like a lot of artists are I have to reinvent myself or find something new that I've never talked about before.
Interesting. What was new felt like it being in the book form, right?
Mm.
Some of the poems are already written and already had a voice in the bigger world and meant something to certain people, but they didn't have it in text. And so it kind of gave it a new medium for everything, even the old stuff, to even be new.
Very cool. This was a follow-up from your debut, Chalk Outlines of Snow Angels. Was there pressure? Did you feel pressure to do a follow-up or to do a second piece?
No, no, not at all. Because some of the was Chalk Outlines of Snow Angels was a very small run. And so if you could imagine, it was me, 2012, in college, hustling books from my apartment on campus at
Wow.
UW-Madison. Just like an MC would hustle like CDs and mixtapes out of his
Yeah,
car.
yeah.
That was my hustle as like a young poet trying to have a voice and doing what I saw so many brilliant poets do. I was like, poets are publishing. I need to publish. I need to figure this out. And so like I was like trying to like I got my book on like in camp like on campus bookstores and stuff like that. But like that
Amazing.
like it was my baby brainchild. But this is a whole like new monster. It's like
This
before
is in Target.
yeah, like before like I had like a little I planted a little seed in my house in my little pot and then I watched
Yeah.
my little tomatoes grow and this is like, oh no, like you have the grocery store here. And so it's a very different dynamic.
Wow. I'm also curious, how did you end up at school in Wisconsin?
At the time, Wisconsin, and still Wisconsin offers a brilliant program called the First Wave Program. And the First Wave Program accepts artists that represents the different elements of hip hop and
Mm.
poetry and literature being one of them. And so when I was seeking colleges and trying to find a university, I was also deep in me trying to become a writer and wanting and desiring to become a writer. And one of my mentors, Michael Sorelli at the time, said to me, like, you should send your writing portfolio to University of Wisconsin. I'll advocate for you. And I got into their program and I got not only a 4-year, but a 5-year scholarship. And I was able to study African American literature all the while performing and being an artist. And so it was an interesting place to end up being coming from Newark. But when it comes to poetry and the world of poetry, it made perfect sense.
Yeah, it must have been a very interesting juxtaposition of cultures on all types of levels in
Yeah,
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin is white, and it was that was definitely a culture shock for sure, for sure.
So when in your life did you find poetry? Did it find you? Well, like at what age was it something that you started discovering?
I guess poetry found me. And when I say that, I mean words found me. Like I think growing up, I was always attracted to a good story, whether that was a story by way of Whitney Houston, whether that was watching Matilda, whether that was like me listening in on my mother's conversations. Like I've
Yeah.
always been attracted to and I've always wanted to write a good dynamic story, even if it wasn't mine.
Mm.
And so there was, and so I knew that everywhere I heard stories and I love stories and I love watching stories and listening to them. And so by that, I'll say that poetry definitely found me. And then as a child and growing up, you just try to figure out how you can participate. And so like, just like babies learn how to walk, you kind of learn how to use your voice. You learn how you want to write, how you, the things you want to write about, what poems you want to speak behind a microphone versus the poems you'll just write in the book, the poems that you'll write in a book versus the poems that no one will ever hear. And so poetry found me. And then just as a student of poetry, I'm always just testing out where my voice belongs and where my voice fits in the medium.
Do you miss live performances? Have you? Yeah. I mean, also your poem Nicki Minaj kind of like blew up. Was that the first kind of video that blew up for you at that time?
Yeah, that's so funny because everybody's like, your first poem was Footnotes for Kanye. And I'm like, absolutely, it wasn't. And so thank you for saying that. Like, yeah, I wrote. So, and I'll tell you about that too. I was,
Yeah, because you look like a little baby in that, and your voice, but also your voice and your message is so intelligent, profound, and in control. And it's so, I got chills the whole time I watched it and was just like wanted to bottle up every essence that you had because it was just so authentic.
because what's so funny is that like I'm not just like people look at me and they'll be like, oh, she's a poet, but truth be told, I belong to a community that creates poetry that way. And so that particular piece was for a slam competition where like we were going to be judged on our performance, our creativity, our style, our choreography. And so it's like that piece was specifically built to be put in a certain space, in a certain medium. Whereas the world got, and they were like, look at this poem. But the poetry community was like, oh, that was a slam poem. But it was, so I'm at the University of Wisconsin, and the poetry community knows that like we have these like major poetry competition. And this was the major collegiate competition that was going to happen. And I was going to do this poem. And I remember me doing the poem and the poem was like, I did the poem for a year and no one noticed, like it never made it on YouTube. No one ever saw it. And then there was a time where I wanted to be Greek and I wanted to join a sorority, and the Greeks were doing step shows and somebody who was supposed to do the opening act didn't show up. And they were like, Jasmine, can you do this opening? Can you do the opening act? Like, just do one of those poems that you got. Like, and I was like, all right, cool. And I did the poem and we put the poem on YouTube, and then all of this stuff happened. But it was way before we knew the dynamics of YouTube and what it meant to go viral, because this was still before Instagram. And when we were getting used to what it meant for Facebook to have like shares and things like that. And so this was like my first piece, and I think it was like in 2010. But like, yeah, I was a college girl doing a poetry competition, and my poem was about Nicki Minaj.
But it's great. I mean, so you basically kind of package your entire performance for that specific medium, like you said. What kind of prep goes into that?
Oh, so much. And so, as a creative, you want to build something that's memorable, that people can walk out the space thinking like, wow, that was incredible. Like anybody can write a love poem, and you can hear 10 love poems, but if you hear a love poem about like maybe astronaut, you might say, but I remember the one about astronauts because it's that thing that stood out for you. And so it takes months of trying to be creative, building what is clever, building up a punchline that the audience can remember, a level of thoughtfulness, editing, and a lot of writers have the opportunity or get blessed enough to be a part of writing communities that they can test out their writing, and someone can say, that's not good, or that's amazing. And so belonging to those communities, I was able to build this poem. And it probably took like a little bit over a month to write. And we won the national competition. And so it was definitely worth it. But it takes prep, practice, memorization, choreography. So much stuff that many people don't think about when we talk about poems.
Yeah, I mean, it's a testament to you and the poetry community that you make it look very spontaneous, and you make it look very effortless, and knowing that it is, extremely thoughtful from top to bottom all the way through is very cool. And I think can give people a deeper appreciation for what they're seeing, that it's not just kind of, you got up there and decided to say words this way or move your arms this way, that every part of it is part of it. That's very cool. Also, in terms of writing, I saw you posted on your Instagram this idea that I thought was so cool for writers that get writer's block. You talked about your kitchen theory. Could you explain that? I think it's so like wonderful.
And it's so simple. Thank you.
Right.
I was just talking about how people are like, how do you deal with writer's block? And that seems to be like the number one question that people ask. And sometimes it makes sense, but sometimes it sounds absolutely absurd because like literally you can write about anything. Like you can write, the chair is blue. I sat on the blue chair was hard. I will not sit on the blue chair again. And that is writing. And so we must be talking about something else when we mean I can't write. We must be talking about I lack inspiration. I lack the ability to write something good, something thoughtful. And so it's like, if we're running with that concept, I was like, well, there has been many times in my career as a writer where I've written good stuff that have validated me, right? And people will acknowledge me as a writer, a poet. And so I get in this habit of expecting things to be good. And I realize that I feel that more often than I feel writer's block, that the feeling that I get when I can't write is not me not being able to write, but me not liking what I've written. And so I was like, what is our expectations? And so the kitchen theory is basically me saying, when we want to build something thoughtfully, just like as if we want to build a mill, you don't say, okay, you don't show up to the stove and expect food to become, because that literally that doesn't make sense. But we do that with the pen and the paper. We literally sit down, we take the pen and we say, okay, this should be good. Yeah. And we'll write stuff and we have an expectation for goodness. And we wouldn't have that expectation in any other form, whether it was like making food. And when you think about something as simple as making food, you have to go into the refrigerator. And so going into the refrigerator might mean going into the mind. And then you have to pull things out of the refrigerator. And so now we're talking about going into the mind and preparing things. But then the thing is it's like, how do you know you have things in your mind to cook? And so it's like sometimes we realize like we're lacking imagination. And if we had a little bit more imagination, that would give us a little bit more moments that we were satisfied with on the page. But the kitchen theory in most simple form is just like the same thoughtfulness and preparation and consideration and experimentation that we use in the kitchen is the same sort of approach we can take when writing. Sometimes we experiment with different foods that we saw on TikTok or in different cookbooks. Sometimes we need to like literally cut. I think about onions too a lot when I'm thinking about this theory, because I'm just like, depending on what you're cooking, you cut your onions differently. And so preparation becomes this huge dynamic. And when I think about preparation in terms of poetry, I'm thinking of the imagination. How do we prepare the mind and the imagination to hold a story? Because we literally can talk about a chair, but the imagination holding the chair and the mind just simply holding the chair can mean very different things. So it's like, what part of us is holding the thought? And based on what part of us is holding the thought, we'll decide how worthy that thought is.
That blows my mind and my unconscious and my imagination.
I'm learning something right now too.
No, it's great because it's also, I think too, a lot of writer's block comes from like preemptive judgment and expectation of a certain quality, like you said. And, when you go into your kitchen, and you have all the tools there and you have ingredients there, just the assurance that you have everything to make something puts a little bit less pressure on knowing that you'll have food at the end of your experience in that place. It's a beautiful, it's a hugely profound, simple, but incredibly deep metaphor that I'm a huge fan of. And you can build on it in so many different ways. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, I have more questions for you. So we'll be right back with more Not Too Deep.
Not Too Deep with Grace Helbig.
Hi, friends. Grace Helbig here from the podcast Not Too Deep, which you are currently listening to, hosted by me, Grace Helbig. Just wanted to say a couple of things. One, thank you so much for listening. And two, if you are enjoying yourself to such a degree that you'd love to leave us a review on the Apple Store, that would be so appreciated, because again, you are very appreciated for giving us your time, your ears, your attention, whatever it may be. And that was my couple of things. Now back to me. Okay, before we get into the questions that I ask every single guest that's on the podcast, I need to know about Buy Weed from Women. Can you explain what this is to people that don't know and how you got involved with this?
Yes, Buy Weed from Women happened because one day I was home, and I've always designed merchandise for going on tour as a poet. It was a way of making more money. Like if you had little quotes and posters and t-shirts, you could just have a little bit more of a cushion when you traveled as an independent artist. And so the way I kept my costs down was by printing in black and white. And so I would print my poetry in black and white. And I got used to playing around with short form poetry in order to put it on product. Because you can't just put a long poem on a coffee mug.
Right.
And so I was just playing around with lines, and I literally one day wrote Buy Weed from Women. And I was like, these words sound important and they sound like they will be valuable. And they sound like they belong somewhere and they belong in the community. And so, but I, at the time, wasn't in the cannabis industry. I was literally just playing with script and playing with text.
This was totally independent of anything in the cannabis industry, just a phrase that you had the intuition was supposed to be bigger than just on paper.
Home smoking weed, being creative.
Yeah.
But when you stumble on gold and you're like, did anybody see that? And it felt like that golden moment where I was like, I have something brilliant here. And I remember telling a friend, and that friend was like, yeah, but that just has nothing to do with you. Like, what do you have to do with this? You should probably stick to poetry. But then I was so sold on it. I thought it was so cool. I thought it was the coolest thing I've ever heard in my life. And so I was like, let me just put it on my Instagram. Then let me sell it on my website. Then I realized that Buy Weed from Women sold way more than the things that was on my website. So I had all of my little poems, and then I had this one little t-shirt, and it was doing better than everything else. And so it came to a point where I was just like, well, what if I gave it its own home? What if it had its own website, its own Instagram? And then it became this force in the cannabis industry. And I realized that I had something brilliant because I wasn't competing with cannabis products. I was unifying women, and I wasn't a product. I was a campaign. And everybody, or a lot of people in the industry, wanted to wear and be a part of Buy Weed from Women because they like the message, and they feel like the message brings people together. And so I kind of stumbled on a pot of gold and just did my best to make something good out of it. But it's the most fun thing I've ever done. Where poetry is super emotional, right? There's a very, very emotional impact that I feel when I write poems, to the point where it's sometimes you can't write, sometimes you can. This is a process, a very intimate and scary process to be a poet, especially to write about Black things. And then to have Buy Weed from Women feels like this fun, playful world that I can try out design ideas and and I can employ people and we can be creative and have fun. And so I'm so lucky and grateful to have that balance of both worlds.
That's so cool. Are there plans for other things with Buy Weed from Women?
So many other things. Like before, like to be honest, like Buy Weed from Women was in my closet, like in my loft. And then this year we got the opportunity to get our own studio.
Amazing.
We have 3 part-time employees that work for us. And that happened because of like, in part because of the success of the book, because I couldn't necessarily run the company while I was promoting my book. And so it gave me the opportunity to think firmly and be like, I need a team. And so to know that your company can hire people, and then our goal is to expand and distribute across the United States and in Canada, and to continue hiring people. And I was like, I think that's one of my biggest goals, and the thing that makes me the most happy is that, like, what if people could build a livelihood off of just a random idea that you created?
I mean, it's incredible and kind of a cool way to look at how uniquely you can be involved in an industry without competing directly with the people that are already in that industry. It's just such a very inspiring way to think about getting involved in things that are, you know, like you said earlier, like look at what is in your world already, like look at the things that you enjoy authentically and genuinely, and how can you uplift them in some way that isn't just by like getting in there and selling weed.
And I was like, what makes me different? I was like, I'm the Black girl. I don't have the money that everybody else has. Like, I don't have a trust. I didn't get investors. Like, I'm still, Buy Weed from Women has never accepted any money from anybody. And so I was like, what makes this company special? Like, I've sat around like multi-million-dollar cannabis companies who have everything, who have the machines and the farms. And I'm like, and then what makes me the person? And I was like, oh, like when everybody has cannabis and money, I have the message. And the message moves faster the message will move faster than money sometimes.
It has a value that's way more longer lasting maybe than just profit.
Exactly. Like you'll see 20 different like water brands. And one that you support is the one that's in most alignment with your message. And then I think that's why the products they sell so well. And we're not like doing any crazy designs where it's like, that's the most brilliant design I've ever seen, or that's the most heavy duty shirt. It'll last you forever. It's not that. It's what we're saying to people.
Yeah.
And I feel grateful to have the company at my hands and to be able to play with it and grow it.
It's very, very cool. I can't wait to see what you do with it.
Yeah, we'll see some stuff.
Please, I would love that. I wear only sweatshirts, like 5 different sweatshirts in rotation for the last year. So I need some new clothes.
I got you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, on a little bit of a lighter note, I'm going to ask you the 2 questions I ask every single guest that is on the podcast. The first is, who, alive or dead, would you most like to throw cold spaghetti at? Yeah.
That's the hardest question I've ever
Well, it's also just to make it a little...
I thought you were going to say who I would want to talk to, and I had my answer.
So just to make this a little bit easier, I kind of think of this, your answer as, it's just who comes up in this moment. This can be an answer that changes on a daily basis, an hourly basis. And you can also consider that it's someone that you want to celebrate by throwing cold spaghetti at versus vilify by throwing cold spaghetti at. So it's just based purely on your intention.
That's a hard question. I would throw cold spaghetti. The only people who are coming to mind are Donald Trump and Kanye.
Yeah, great. 2 great answers. We've had you are in good company with other guests that have also had those answers. So all good. Okay, the other question I ask every single guest is to tell us your worst pants shitting story or like a bathroom emergency situation, but you can only use 3 words or 3 small phrases to explain the event. So, for instance, mine is college, jogging, front lawn.
Okay. Okay. But this isn't my situation, and I hope this person never sees this.
Okay.
But mine is 3 words.
Or like small phrases or like
Okay.
a combo. Yeah.
First date.
Okay.
I thought Shorty died. Won't do this again.
Great. Oh no. Okay, no follow-up questions there. But yeah, that paints a whole scene for us to explore. Okay, now we have a section of our podcast called Hot or Deep, where you can choose to answer a deep question that we have for you, or you can give us your hot take on a topic that we have.
Gotcha.
Would you like a deep question or would you like to give us a hot take?
Let's start with a hot take.
You want to do a hot take? Okay. My hot take for you is, do you have thoughts on poetry becoming just a trend?
Do I have thoughts on poetry becoming just a trend? I think everything has its trendy moments where it gets the spotlight and it gets the most attention. I don't have a problem with it, but I'm always invested in the longevity of poetry. But right now, poetry is trendy, right? Because Amanda Gorman has become a household name. And by that, people are also paying attention to my poetry in a way that they may not have if poetry wasn't in the spotlight at this moment. And so poetry being a literary form and being trendy, hopefully will bring up the art form in a way that allows artists to make more money and get more value around what they create.
Yeah. Do you have, on top of that, hopes for the future of the industry or the community?
Yeah, like I want people to access poetry in more forms, allow more poets to write, better deals in publishing houses, better all kinds of different things I would love to happen for the poetry industry. Absolutely. And it definitely is around our visibility, what people offer us and how people honor us in the conversation.
That's beautiful. I love it. Okay, we're going to take one last break. And when we get back, we have a couple questions sent in from listeners and viewers that need some advice. And we'll be giving some very unprofessional advice right after this. We'll be right back with more Not Too Deep.
Not too deep with Grace Helbig.
Jasmine, we have some questions sent in from listeners and viewers that need advice. And you and I, are, just as a caveat, are not professional, advice givers, just people with thoughts that will say them out loud. So this is career advice. And you had kind of mentioned a mentor earlier, so this might be up your alley. When it comes to the directions you want to take in your career, do you follow your mentor/teacher's advice, which is legitimately telling you a clear way on how to achieve X, Y, or Z? Or do you follow what your head is telling you to do, even though you're not exactly sure how this will play out? And there's a possibility that it could not work out exactly how you planned it to be.
You know, I like when people strategize and plan. I think planning and strategy is very, very important. I'm not necessarily the person who's going to be like, I'm going to do this random idea. I don't know how it'll go, but I'm going to give it a shot. Because oftentimes, if you don't know how it'll go, you might fail because you didn't plan. And if you strategize, you know your options of how it'll go. And so I think planning leads you to the commitment and to the decision making. And so if someone gives us a strategy, even if it means taking a piece of it and tailoring the rest, I think it's important to be very strategic and thoughtful.
How did you get the mentors or the people that you kind of lean on for advice in your life?
I get them in all kinds of ways. Like I remember meeting a woman 2 years ago, and she looked at me and she said, "You're going to be my art daughter." And I was like, "And you're going to be my art mom." And this woman has like looked out for me and has been the kindest woman to me and loving. And I know that I can call her at any time. Like I called her when I had a breakup. I called her when I got a book deal. And then I remember meeting Camilla Forbes, who is still like a very important part of my life when it comes to just learning and growing as a Black professional. And I saw her, she spoke at my school a few times. She had this, she worked in Dumbo, Brooklyn. She was an associate director. She's the coolest Black woman I've ever met. Like, I just remember like her vibe was just cool. She had her own office, everything about this woman. I just wanted to be like her. And so I said to her, like, when I think like I sent her an email or said something and I was like, "Can I work for you? You don't have to pay me. Like, I just need a Metro card and I'll figure out the rest." Because I knew that if I hung out with her, I would get to see cool stuff and see cool stuff. And so like, I like was working as like her assistant, and then I'll be on the phone and they'll be like, "We're doing the Nas Illmatic reunion piece at the Kennedy Center." And when I was working for her, she was working on Tupac's Broadway piece, "Holla If You Hear Me." And so it was just like, I wasn't making any money, but I was like sitting in rooms and listening to the coolest stuff I could possibly listen to. And the knowledge that I was receiving like could not be bought. And there was no space. Like she didn't have an internship program. Like this was just an independent, brilliant director. And I was just like, I want to be connected to her. And like, what person wouldn't want just a free personal assistant? And so it was like, so I did that for 2 years. And like, she sometimes didn't come to the office. And so like, I was in her office in Brooklyn. And like, I felt like the coolest girl in the world. Like I was just sitting in a little office in Dumbo. And like, I would go out and like, look at the river on lunch break and like feel like the coolest girl in Brooklyn. And I didn't have a dime, but like, it was such a beautiful it built me as an artist. And so I'm grateful for that.
I think that's such a great story and a great piece of advice is, to kind of get it, not insert, but like if you find an opportunity, like you said, to do something that might, create an opportunity that might not have necessarily been there, and like really assess the actual value. Is the money or a paycheck more valuable than the experience you were getting from that? Like probably not at the time.
And I think you got me on the roll right now. I think I always say, and I love to talk about this, but that I work for value, not money. And sometimes money is value, but sometimes it's not. And so oftentimes, especially on Instagram, you'll hear like people say like, "Don't pay me with exposure," or "I don't work for free." And it's just like, no, absolutely no one should work for free. But sometimes you have to create the opportunities. And that's why like I printed out merch and was like designing my own merch and stumbled upon Buy Weed from Women, because I was like, sometimes I don't get paid at shows, but if they let me sell merchandise, I'll make more money. And I wasn't a merchandise designer, but it's just like, I found the value of like, if I get an audience, I can sell them things. Or like, even though this woman is not paying me, if I do right in this position, one day she might be able to pay me, or I'm going to meet such brilliant people and they're going to be able to co-sign me along my journey. And that's a longer lasting value than a $2,000-$4,000 check. And it is so crazy. And so, yeah.
It's very, I mean, because there's also that level of, removing your ego from the situation and finding the value in, like, what you're saying, the experience, and the, your brain works in this more kind of analytical way of assessing a situation for the good that you can find, rather than where you're being ripped off or where you might be coming up short or not able to get the job. And I think that's such a great use of your brain energy, because so often people can expect things or have expectations of things that don't come to fruition, rather than seeing how they can make the best of a situation that they're given and just sort of accepting the realities of it. I think that's incredibly cool. Are you taking interns? Are you taking mentees?
Yeah, I'm not taking, I mean, I feel like mentees, it's such a like emotional relationship where it's just like, sometimes you literally just fall into the arms of another person, and it just builds. And so I kind of, if that relationship comes, you kind of have to welcome it. Just like so many people welcomed me, and I know this woman, like Camilla Forbes, she didn't have an internship program, but like she found space for me. And so I'm always down to find space for people. And just like by We from Women, it's just like, I'm flattered by the fact that, and honored that my career can help me add more people to a bigger system. And so I'm totally down to like build and grow with people.
Oh, that's beautiful. Jasmine, we have to wrap up, but before we do completely, we like to give our guests for making time a personalized horoscope from us to you that I think Melissa just put in the chat, if you're able to look at the chat and read your horoscope out loud.
All right. Dear Taurus, bull of the stars, your confidence and your sensuality will be raised this week. Lots of hand holding and soft touches are what your fingers will be craving for, but just be careful not to do it to the cashier handing back change.
Or do it.
That's so interesting. I haven't had my hand held in such a long time, so I'm going to get back to you on this one.
Let us know.
For this, so
let us know how it goes. Jasmine, this has been wonderful. Thank you for so much food for thought. Where can people get the book? Where can people find you and everything that you're up to if they don't already know?
Yeah, the book is available anywhere you can buy a book, hopefully. So Target, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, potentially your local bookstore. And people can find me at jasminemans.com or on Instagram or any social media platform by way of poet Jasmine Mans. And so
do yourself a favor, check her out, buy a weed from women, get the book, see everything that she's up to. It's nothing but great, beautiful energy that's worth absorbing. Thank you, Jasmine, for your time. Really appreciate it.
All right. See you soon.
See you guys next time on another episode of Not Too Deep. Goodbye.
Too deep, too deep, too deep, not too deep with Grace Helbig.
Not Too Deep is a production of Grace Helbig Incorporated. Producer Melissa D. Montz. Edited by Shireen Lani Yunus. Post-production sound by Chris Henry. And an extra special thanks to Flula for the theme music.